Africa is a continent rich in natural resources and human resources. However, some countries have not reached their full potential, but are continuing to develop at a rapid pace. The question is, can they leave their past behind? Professor Eyerly, this whole matter of Africa being the last frontier, what do you think about that? Are investors missing out on what really could be a great chance to develop this country and develop themselves as well?
Well, I think so. I think they're missing out. I mean, but they're beginning to realize that perhaps they are missing out. The problem has always been that Africa was seen as a kind of theater of civil wars, of political instability, and so on. But the potential was always sort of ignored. Or if it was not ignored, part of the problem also was that, the foreign powers, were also trying to sort of foster their own clientele within the African continent so that they would have their own direct access to those resources. I'm thinking here specifically of what happened in the Congo, for instance, after independence. Right now, however, I think there's a more realistic appraisal of the situation in Africa, of its potential, because the emphasis really has been on internal reform, and that internal reform is going to, in fact,
should investors look at Africa as the last frontier in terms of development?
Yes, indeed. I think so, yes. They should, in fact, consider, I think there are opportunities, in Africa that, India has shown that there are those kinds of opportunities, because don't forget that in the 50s, India was, in fact, seen in the same terms as Africa is seen today.
And look at them now, all the jobs are going there.
That's right, so, yeah. Well,
yes, and Nathaniel, you wanted to jump in here.
In most African countries, if you get a busy signal, it's in Chinese. China has really led the way in investing in Africa and in taking risks that the United States, frankly, has been slow to take. And it's basically, we've been slow on the draw, and if we're going to create the type of stability we want in Africa, the United States needs to make a commitment to invest. Basically, it's chicken or egg. You can't have one without the other. Investment equals stability, and stability equals investment.
And Hannah, you say one of the problems still is Africa not getting the proper attention it deserves or needs or should have in the world?
Yes, the attention has been an attention on the negative side. We need to look at Africa in its development in all the aspects of a country's moving ahead. In this sense,
shouldn't we be covering, for example, the quote-unquote ethnic cleansing in Sudan and the Darfur region? Shouldn't we be covering these things and telling people about that?
If it's very necessary for the world to know what is going on. These are heart-rending situations, and whatever needs to be done with international help and the African Union and the African local governments themselves, whatever can be done to stop such perpetration or generation of violence and animosity. However, we cannot look at about 6 or 5 African countries with very dire civil wars and let them overshadow everything good that Africa has done. Most of us are very grateful the way Africa brought us up. Even apart from economic development, we also have traditions which stabilizes children. Traditions that, when you look in the psychiatric field, there are scientists who believe that African stability emotionally is much stronger than looking at the West.
And Faisal, I'll let you have the last word here, I guess. What do you see, what are your perceptions as to the keys to economic reform and Africa's rise in the world?
Well, I think that the potential is clearly there, as Hannah has pointed out. I mean, there are untapped resources. There's a huge labor force, lots of potential. Unfortunately, I think the media continues to focus upon those stories that really alarm people and discourage investment. That's not to say that we should not focus on issues like Darfur. That's not to say that we should not focus on issues like Somalia. But what I think we should do is focus on things like the untapped resources, on the tremendous history of countries like Ethiopia.
Okay, Faisal Ahmeditsi and Professor Eyerly, Hannah Martinez and Nathaniel Raymond, thank you all for coming in. It was a great discussion. Okay.